Brachos Daf Gimel continues the discussion of how when Mashiach will come, it will obscure the miracles of Yetzias Mitzrayim, but it will not totally erase them. We will still remember them, they just won't be as important. The Gemara is making the point that when something is changed, it doesn't necessarily totally erase the past. So the Gemara says when Yaakov Avinu's name was changed to Yisrael, it did not erase the name of Yaakov, it's still mentioned in certain circumstances. The Gemara now brings a pasuk to prove that Yetzias Mitzrayim will not be erased. Al tizkaru rishonos v'kadmonios al tizbanenu. So rishonos, the first things, that means the trouble we had from the foreign kings, we should not remember that. That'll be forgotten when Mashiach will come. But kadmonios, our first miracles of Yetzias Mitzrayim, al tizbanenu, we won't think deeply into them, but we won't forget them. Says the Gemara, after that pasuk comes Hineni Oisa Chadasha Ata Titzmach. What's that referring to? Rabbi Yosef says that is the war of Gog Magog, what the Goyim call Armageddon. The Gemara says that this relationship with Yetzias Mitzrayim is as follows. It's imagine somebody who's walking in the street and he's attacked by a wolf, and he survives, and wherever he goes he tells people the story of how he was saved from the wolf. Then he's attacked by a lion, so he stops talking about the wolf and starts talking about how he got saved from the lion. And then when he gets attacked by a snake and he still survives, that's the only thing that he talks about. The other ones still exist, but he's not so into them anymore. Now the Gemara goes back to the discussion of names that were changed. The Gemara says there's a pasuk in a different Yamim that calls Avram. It says Avram hu Avraham. The Gemara wants to know, how can you call Avraham by the name Avram without the he anymore? The Gemara will say later that's because the Navi over here is really just saying the praises of HaKadosh Baruch Hu changed Avram's name from Avram to Avraham. So it's referring to the time before his name was changed, so it calls him Avram. But once his name was changed to Avraham, we don't go back necessarily to use Avram. The Gemara even says somebody who will do that is violating a mitzvah saseh of your name should be called Avraham. The Gemara brings another sheet that you're violating mitzvahs lo saseh, where it says v'lo yikra oid es shimcha Avram. Now the Gemara says, what was the meaning of the two names? Avram was a contraction of Aram, the father of Aram. Avraham is a contraction of Avhamoin, the father of a multitude of nations. After Avram became the father of the entire world, his name was changed. Now the Gemara discusses the change of Sarai to Sarah. Now the word Sar means a prince, so Sarah is a princess. So the Gemara says when she was called Sarai, that's like saying our princess. She was only a princess for Kal Yisrael, for her nation. Then when she became a princess for the entire world, her name was changed to Sarah. The Gemara says, if when you say that Avram, you say the name Avram, you're violating a asay, so how could you call Yaakov? You should be violating an asay there also. And let's say it says you won't be called Yaakov anymore. The Gemara says it's different. Yaakov, we find that the Psukim continue to call him Yaakov even afterwards. The Gemara says, what about Sarai? We can't call her Sarai either anymore because that'll be a Isser Asay or Lo Asay, because the Torah says don't call her Sarai anymore. My answer is no. That was just Hashem telling Avram that, but he wasn't saying it as the rest of the world can't call her Sarai. And that is the end of Perek Rishon. We now begin the second Perek of Masechta Brachos. This Perek will discuss a number of the halachos of Shema. The first Mishnah starts referring to having kavana in Shema, whether it's kavana to be yetz to the midst of a Shema or kavana in understanding the words. The Gemara will discuss proper pronunciation. The Gemara will discuss the language you could say it in, the order of the words, and a number of other halachos that will come up in the remainder of the daf. So the Gemara begins by talking about the kavana that one has to have when he says Shema. So the Mishnah we'll start with. The beginning of the parak starts with the Mishnah, and it says that somebody who is reading from the Torah and he comes to Shema, and it's the time for saying Shema. So he's only yet to the midst of saying Shema if he had in mind, if he was mechavein. The Gemara will discuss what that kavana is. Now the Gemara talks about interrupting in the middle of Shema and the brachos of Shema. So to organize this discussion over here, we're going to have a machlokas between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Huda. There are two levels of places in the Shema which you may consider interrupting. One is between the paragraphs. The Gemara will define what's called between the paragraphs. And a much more difficult place to interrupt is in the middle of a paragraph. It's easier to interrupt halachically between the paragraphs than in the middle of one. And there are three levels of interruptions. One is just interrupting randomly. Another one is if you're interrupting to speak to somebody that you feel obligated to honor. And the third level is if you are interrupting to speak to someone that you have fear of. You're afraid if you don't honor him correctly, he will kill you. Now, each of these can theoretically be subdivided. Are you speaking to him first? You're greeting this person? Or are you responding to a greeting that he gave you? Logically, you would be more obligated to respond to a greeting than you would to greet him in the first place. So the Gemara says the following halacha. Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Huda both agree about most of these halachas. We match up the second level of person you're greeting, somebody who you feel obligated to honor. You're allowed to greet him between the prakim, between the paragraphs of Shema. Somebody who you feel obligated to honor, you're allowed to greet even in the middle. Someone who you fear, you're allowed to greet even in the middle of a parak of Shema or the brachos of Shema. The question is, who are you allowed to answer his greeting for? Rabbi Meir says, anybody you're allowed to greet, you're allowed to answer the greeting of. The halachas are the same. Somebody that you honor between the program, somebody that you fear even in the middle. Rabbi Huda says, no, answering a greeting is one level lower. You're allowed to answer anybody, even if you have no obligations towards him, as long as you're between the chapters. And if you're in the middle of a chapter, you're allowed to even answer only somebody who you feel obligated to honor, not somebody who you fear. The Gemara now defines what between the prakim is. The first opinion is that it's between any of the paragraphs of the brachos of Kriya Shema and Shema itself. And Rabbi Yehuda says, except for between Vayomer and Emes V'Yatzev. That doesn't count as being a prakim. There you cannot interrupt. Now the Gemara discusses the order of Shema. The Gemara says that Rabbi Shua ben Karcha said, how come Shema is before V'Hayim Shemaya? Shema is accepting the Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, all Malchus Shemayim. V'Hayim Shemaya is accepting the mitzvahs. You got to first accept Hashem, then you can accept His mitzvahs. Why is it that V'Hayim Shemaya is before Vayomer? Well, V'Hayim Shemaya tells us about the mitzvah of Limud HaTorah. That applies by day and by night. The chapter of Vayomer tells us about the mitzvah of Tzitzis. That only applies during the day. It doesn't apply at night. It says a Re'isim Maisa. You have to be able to see them. So the one which applies more is discussed first. Now the Gemara begins, and the Gemara is going to launch into a discussion of whether you need kavana when you're doing a mitzvah or not. You have to have intent to do what you're doing. Let's set it up as follows. There are three levels of kavana you could have when you're doing a mitzvah. The highest level kavana is that you have intent to fulfill the mitzvah with this action. The middle level is you don't have intent to fulfill the mitzvah, but you do have intent to do what you're doing. And then the lowest level is that you're completely acting thoughtlessly. You don't know what's flying. So the Gemara says, look at the Mishnah. The Mishnah said somebody was reading from the Torah, and he has to have kavana to fulfill the mitzvah in order to be yotze the mitzvah when he gets to Shema. So the Gemara says, you see, the mitzvah requires kavana. The Gemara is assuming that it means the highest level, that he intends to fulfill the mitzvah. The Gemara says, no. It means that he has to have the middle level of kavana, that he knows what he's doing. He's intending to actually be reading from the Torah. The Gemara says, what do you mean? He's reading from the Torah. What else could he be intending to do? The Gemara says, no, you may have thought that even if he's just thoughtlessly reading, meaning he's reading through the words to check over to see if there's any mistakes in the Sefer Torah, then he's not Yaitza. He has to have Yaitza. He has to have intent to actually be learning, reading from the Torah. The Gemara now quotes is what language can you say Shema in? Rebbe and the Chachamim. Rebbe says you have to say Shema in Hebrew. The Torah says V'hoyu. You have to say it in the way that it appears. Rebbe, the Chachamim say, you could say Shema in any language because it says Shema Yisrael. You should hear it. It should be the language that you understand. The Gemara wants to know, what does each one do with the other one's Shita? Rebbe says you can't learn anything out of the word Shema because Shema is used for a different halacha. It's used for the halacha that you have to say Shema loud enough to hear. The Chachamim don't hold of that halacha. What do the Chachamim do with Rebbe's pasuk of V'hayu? Oh, that's not coming to teach you like Rebbe says it has to be in Lashon Kodesh. That's coming to teach you that you have to say it in proper order. How does Rebbe know that halacha that has to be in the correct order? That's from Hadvarim, an extra hey. Hadvarim, the words have to be done with the definite article, Hadvarim, the way they appear. Rebbe does not hold of that halacha. They do not have to be. Rebbe does not have that drasha of hey, and therefore that halacha that has to be in the right order has to come from V'hayu. Now the Gemara says, hold on a second. Rebbe and the Chachamim both have a pasuk for their halacha. Does that mean that the pasuk is teaching me this halacha only in regards to Shema, but in regards to learning the rest of the Torah, it's not true. Rebbe has a pasuk that tells me that you have to say Shema in Hebrew because it says V'hayu. That means that the rest of the Torah doesn't have to be in Hebrew. And the Chachamim have a pasuk that you're allowed to say it in any language. Does that mean that they hold that the rest of the Torah can only be said in Lashon HaKodesh? The Gemara says no. Each of them needed a pasuk because you may learn out from the other one's pasuk. So the pasuk that they have is written to tell me that the other one's pasuk is not coming to teach me what they thought it is. But really, the halacha is true all over. Rebbe would hold that you cannot say any part of the Torah learning in any other language other than Lashon HaKodesh, and the Chachamim would say that you can. The Gemara now switches to discuss the kavanah that a person has to have in the meaning of the words. Says the Gemara, when you're saying Shema, you have to have kavanah in the meaning of the words because it says Hadvarim al levavecha. The words should be on your heart. So Rabbi Eliezer says that's only up until those words because it says V'hayu Hadvarim ha'ela. These words have to be on your heart. Rabbi Kiva says no, the entire parsha has to be on your heart. You have to understand it all because right after that it says Asher aneichi mitzvah v'chayim. Everything that I'm commanding you today, you have to know. So the Gemara says Rabbi Bar Bachana paskin like Rabbi Akiva, the entire first paragraph. You have to have kavanah in the meaning of the words. The Gemara brings a different version of this discussion. The first opinion was you have to have kavanah for the entire Shema. And on that, Amad Yamar said no, only up until the first parsha. And again, the psak was you only have to have kavanah for the first parsha. The Gemara now brings another brisa, which is an interesting discussion. The brisa entertains the possibility that one of the chapters of Shema you have to say, and one of them you only have to think the words. So the Gemara has a machlokes which one is which. And the Gemara says, well, in one of them it says al levavecha, and the other it says v'dibarta bam, or ledaber bam. The Gemara points out that there are similar expressions in both chapters. You have al levavecha and al levavchem in each chapter, and you have v'dibarta bam and ledaber bam in each chapter. So the same way you have to have kavanah, you have to think the words in both chapters because it says a al levavchem expression. You also have to speak the words. So how could you have one speaking and one just thinking? So the Gemara changes. The Gemara says, really, you have to say the words in all of the chapters, like it says, V'dibarta and Lidaber Bam, but you only have to have kavanah in the first chapter, because it says, Al Levavecha. In the second chapter, where it says, Al Levavchem, that's a different halacha. That's not saying that you have to have kavanah in the words. That's saying that you have to put tefillin on your arm opposite your heart. The Gemara now discusses the second opinion, which has a similar exchange with similar kashas, except that the Gemara's final step is that the first paragraph you have to both have kavanah and say it. In the second paragraph, you only have to have kavanah on the words, you don't have to actually say them. The Gemara says, but what do you mean? It says they're also lidaber bam. That's just telling you that you should teach it to your children, but it's not teaching you that you have to actually say the words. Now the Gemara moves on to another discussion. The Gemara says, one opinion, you only have to have kavanah on the words Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That's Rabbi Meir. Rava says that's the halacha, and that is indeed the halacha. Another brisa that you should extend the word echad, and if you do, then your lifetime will be extended. The Gemara says you should extend the dalid. You should not extend. You should not extend the ches, and you should not make the ches too short. And how long should you extend it for? The Gemara says that Rav Yirmiyah saw that Rav Chia ben Rav Abba was stretching it for a very long time, and he was having all kinds of kavanas while he said it. And the Gemara says, no, you should only stretch it long enough to have kavanah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is king over the 7 heavens and the 1 earth. That's Gematria Ches. And the 4 directions of the universe. That's Gematria the Dalet. Gemara brings the opinion of Reb Nosson Bar Mar Okva that you have to have kavanah on the words Al Levavecha. You have to stand still and have kavanah. You can't walk around. The Gemara says for those 2 words, the Gemara says no, everything up till that point, and this goes with the shita that we learned before of Rabbi Bar Chana Amar Rav Yechanan, that you have to have kavanah at that moment up till then, and that's why you have to stop walking around. Gemara records that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, because he gave shir all day throughout Zman Kriya Shema, did not have time to say the full Shema, and he only said Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, which is Kriya Shema D'oraisa Kabbalas Al Malchus Shemayim. One of the Talmidim said, I never saw Rabbi say Shema, I never saw him do Kabbalas Al Malchus Shemayim. The Gemara says, when the moment where he put his hand over his face, that was when he was saying it. And from there comes our minhag that we cover our eyes when we say Shema. It was in the middle of the shir that he did it. It could be that he didn't want the Talmidim to see him saying it, or it could be that he didn't want to mess up his kavanah. Now, the Gemara wants to know, did he later complete the rest of a Shema, or he just said that and that was it? The Gemara brings a machlokes whether he did complete it later or he did not. But one thing's for sure, he would try to teach something in the shir about Yitzias Mitzrayim during the Zman of Kriyas Shema. The Gemara says if he didn't complete it, then he understand why he wanted to. But if he did complete it, so then why? The Gemara says because he wanted to get the mitzvah of saying Yitzias Mitzrayim in the proper time. And even if he completed Shema, it was only later after the proper time because he was saying shir during the entire Zman Kriyas Shema. The Gemara now says even if after the first pasuk of Shema you were half asleep and drifting off, as long as you said all the words, you're yaitza. The Gemara quotes that Rav Nachman told his servant to wake him up if he starts to drift in the first pasuk but not later. And the Gemara records that Rav Yosef said to his father, how did you used to say Shema? And he said that he was very careful that somebody should keep him awake during the first pasuk but not the rest of it. Shema while one is lying on his back because it looks like a chutzpah to Shemaim. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? You're never allowed to lie on your back even when you're not saying Shema, because it could cause hirhurim, it could cause thoughts of sin. The Gemara says that we said not to say Shema lying on your back means even if you're tilted slightly to the side. You can lie like that, but to say Shema like that you can't, because that's a display of arrogance towards the Kadosh Baruch Hu. The Gemara says, but what do you mean? Rav Yochanan used to say Shema lying slightly on his side. The Gemara said Rav Yochanan was very large, and he couldn't lie on his side all the way. He could only lie slightly on his side, and that's what he did. Now we turn to the discussion of when you're allowed to interrupt when you're saying Shema. As we had said earlier, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda seem to agree that you're allowed to greet somebody who you feel that you owe honor to between the prakim of Shema, and you're allowed to greet somebody of whom you are afraid even in the middle of Shema. The discussion that was different between them was when are you allowed to return a greeting. Rabbi Meir had said in the same circumstances, and Rabbi Yehuda said one step lower, you're even allowed to return a greeting to anybody between the prakim, but you're only allowed to return a greeting to somebody whom you owe honor to in the middle of the parak. The Gemara discusses the language of Rabbi Meir. The Gemara is not clear who he's referring to when he says you're allowed to return a greeting. Is it the same or is it one step lower? The Gemara says it couldn't be one step lower because that's the same as Rabbi Yehuda. It wouldn't be a machlokes then. The Gemara adds some words into the Mishnah in order that it fits in the way that we have explained it, and that is the Gemara's maskana, pshat, in Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda.